This is the new Mercedes-Benz Marko Polo, the luxurious camper van, or should I say glamper van. Recently, I spent a week with the VW Kalifornije, and now on this episode, I want to focus on the difference between these two camper vans to tell you which one is better and which is the one you should buy. I'm AJ, you're watching Autogefühl, and join me for another camper van road trip episode. Let's dive right in with the front design. Right off the bat, I do prefer the design of the Marko Polo over the Kalifornije. This is in fact the AMG line, so you do have some more sporty, I don't know if you can call a camper van sporty, but some more sporty elements, like for example, the lower part of the bumper. In fact, even without the AMG line, the grille still does retain this star pattern, so I don't think it's going to be that different if you don't pick the AMG line. You also, of course, have the multi-beam LED lights and a large star right in the middle. The Marko Polo is 5.14 meters long, so it's actually a little bit shorter than the Kalifornije. Being the AMG line, we have these nice 19-inch AMG rims. You can also pick 19-inch rims outside of the AMG line if you like, but again, black contrasting mirror caps, which add to the drama. Now, another cool feature of the Marko Polo is that it comes with air suspension. Of course, this helps with the adaptability on different driving surfaces, but also it's got a really cool camping feature, and I'll tell you about that later on. The Marko Polo is also just under 2 meters tall, but as you can see, the conversion is done by Westfalia. Another cool feature is that you can actually just open the glass window here, so you have easier access to the back. I'll show you how the actual hatch opens later on. Marko Polo badging, a nice shiny scuff plate over here. Another major difference between the two camper vans is that the Marko Polo only comes with one side sliding door. The Kalifornije comes with two, so you can have a longer or a wider wingspan of your campsite, but what that also means is the Kalifornije has a shorter kitchenette, but as you can see, the Marko Polo retains a full kitchenette with a two-stove gas burner as well. Now the interior, to my eyes, looks much nicer. This of course isn't real wood, it's just a vinyl, but it adds a little bit more of that luxurious touch. You can have different colors, you can even have like a granite or a slate-like pattern for the flooring. You have different colors for the cabinets, although I think this is probably the best combination. Automatic sliding door as well. Let's try to keep the interiors clean. Now, while the V-Class has been updated, and that does improve things a bit, the entire camping equipment that is again built here by Westfalia really hasn't changed. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel a little bit outdated as compared to the Kalifornije. But now you have space for 4 passengers. These seats are really nice and comfortable. You have plenty of room to, stretch out. You can store some items here. On the side, you see that there are USB and a regular socket, but only one. In the Kalifornije, there were 2 on the inside and a third one to plug in from the outside. Of course, you can rotate the front seats. It's a little bit finicky because these are all manual controls. And unlike the Kalifornije, there are no storage bins under the front seats. It's actually quite comfortable here. You have space for 2 adults. There's also storage down here in this bin. You can keep some towels and things like that. But of course, this has a full kitchenette because there is no second sliding door. So let's take a look at that. On the right-hand side, we have the sink. In fact, this has a detachable bowl, which is really cool because you can wash vegetables, or if you need to take this to the sanitary room to do the dishes, you don't have to have a separate bowl for that. And it looks, it kind of looks like it's made out of marble. It's not, it's plastic, but it adds to that kind of luxurious feeling of the interior. Even this tap is nice and shiny. And I like that all of these shutters have a little clip, so they're secured in place. Down here, you have the cutlery tray. This doesn't have rubber lining, so I would probably do that right away. But the drawers also have a soft close. How cool is that? More storage down here. This lining is quite nice, although it's not very soft, but you do have some magnets, so you can find some magnetic storage solutions so that your items here don't roll around. Even these shut lines have a little bit of felt lining, so it does have a little bit more, it's a little bit more quality feeling. The biggest difference is right here. You have a 2-burner gas stovetop, whereas in the California you only have one, and therefore they've been able to shrink the length of the kitchenette and provide a second sliding door. But I would say, you know, it's nice to have the option to cook 2 things at the same time. Nice and hot here, so you can make, boil some pasta and fries at the same time. More storage, and this does have a bit of rubber lining at the bottom, so this is nice down here. This is a sliding door, so more storage. This is actually the blinds for the front windows, and I'll show you that later on. Speaking of blinds, of course, this window can be opened like this, and you have blinds right here. So when you're camping and you want privacy, this little window also has its own little blind as well. But just as in the California, there are no fly screens or a mosquito mesh. So if you want to have some ventilation at night, you have to open this all the way and then, be susceptible to having more insects in the interior. There's plenty of smart storage solutions here in the cabinets. And what I really like is that you have a bit of a dresser, which was missing in the California. So a mirror with a light and a little shelf. You also do have an overhead bin, but it's not as large as the one in the California, but it's also nice. I like this logo over there. You have a nice large 40-liter cool box right here. The California also has a nice refrigerator, and it's also accessible from the outside and the inside. There's also a large table that comes out here. This is definitely larger than the one in the California, but that being said, you can also fix the picnic table from the back inside the California. But at the end of the day, this also comes with a picnic table. So if you want to calculate the overall surface area across both tables, this still comes out on top. This also comes out on top in terms of the freshwater tank. So this has about 38 liters, whereas the California has 28 liters. Although during my week camping in the California, I never even used more than 10. So it's easy to fill them up, and I don't think you really need to worry so much about it. Another drawback of the Marko Polo is that there aren't as many options to charge your phone back here in the cabin. We already spoke about how you just have a couple power sockets in the front, but even back here, for example, there's just a 12-volt power socket. So where do you actually sleep in the Marko Polo? As you can guess, this becomes the lower bed and that becomes the upper bed. Unlike the California, this reclines automatically. You can see there are buttons for that here, but first you do need to manually move the bench forward, and if you look back here, there's actually a little slot to put the headrests, so that's nice. They get neatly tucked away. There we go. And now let's see. So not only are the backrests reclining, the base is also lifting itself, and the idea is that this becomes a flat, level area. The belt buckles have also dropped inside, so they're not, jutting out, because definitely that would be really uncomfortable to sleep on. So once this is completely flat, like this, you would push seat back into position, and then roll out this mattress topper. So it's a bit interesting. I'll give my full verdict after I've actually spent a night on this bed. But yeah, I can feel the lumpiness because this seat is not completely flat. There is a little bit of a step up here, and this cushion is very different. It's flatter and a bit more firm than the seat, and unlike the California, this mattress topper is completely soft. There are no plates underneath. does have a bit of a grippy silicone layer in the bottom, so that goes down and grips the seat. I guess I would put my feet down this way because then I have more headroom. I'm 5'8" or about 1.7 meters, and my feet are as far down as I would like to have them. So there is just about enough room for me. So if you're over 6 foot, it might be a little bit tight. It's also not that wide, but 2 people of my size can easily fit here. And if you have kids camping with you, then this is probably where they would be more comfortable. Now to lift the roof, you go to the Marko Polo menu, go to the pop-up roof menu, and it's pretty simple. It says extend, please observe the maximum height, yada yada. And of course have the door open because the bellows will suck in quite a bit of air. So you want to make sure the air pressure is equalized. And then you hold this and the roof starts going up. Now with the roof up, you can easily stand. There's plenty of space to, actually live inside, get changed, cook, and spend good time. The bellows are nice. They feel pretty solid, and we'll see how that fares over actually camping out in them. Although I must say they don't seem to be as modern as the one in the California, because for example, while you can open these windows and here on the side as well, and there is a fly screen behind it, you cannot open the entire front section like you can in the California. The mattress itself is held up here, and even there I think the California has a better solution because this plate or this bed frame is held up with a couple pneumatic struts, so you can easily just push it up or pull it back down. Just need to undo these 2 clips on the strap and then slowly lower it down. It's actually not heavy, and there you go. Up here it's really nice and cozy. The mattress is pretty comfortable. Again, let's check the size. My feet are at the bottom again, and I have a little bit more headroom. Width is also a little bit more, although you see this gap here. If I was all the way on the edge, it's it gets a bit hard here. Now the mattress itself is thicker than the mattress topper below, but of course we had the seat there. But instead, to compensate for that, you have these little box springs. These are very similar. I believe they might even be the same supplier that we saw in the California. And these are mounted on these lateral slats just above the roof liner. So it's not very insulated from the bottom cabin. Unlike the California, you also don't have a trap door to seclude the upper cabin from the lower cabin. You can open these flaps to let in some light and air, and thankfully there are fly screens here. You also have a couple reading lights, so one on either side. And you do have just a couple charging options, not too many, but you see there's a couple USB ports right over there. The Marko Polo does also come with a very large hatch that is automatic, unlike the California. And actually, I would trade off the automatic hatch for the storage solution that the California had, because the chairs, the picnic chairs, were up here. Instead, in the Marko Polo, you see that they're down here. And unfortunately, I think this is a big drawback because it eats up the entire storage area here. Yes, you can put most of your items in the cabinets, but I had my inflatable kayak, we had our laptop bags in here. You need some space tucked away so that you can store items. You can't rely only on the cabinets, and I think this is a bit of a shame. In any case, another thing that's a bit interesting is that while this is a nice padded extender for the bed, and we'll talk about the bed later, this mattress topper, which goes on the seats, is actually really thin. The one in the California was much thicker, also had a sturdy base plate, so that regardless of the contours of the seats and the seat belt buckles and things like that, you had a very uniform bed. So we'll see how this translates to sleeping comfort when we're camping. But you can also see that you have this, you can lift this over here, and then you have all your camping equipment. So you have, for example, your power line. These are the chairs. They're also not so great. We'll take a closer look at this in a minute. I think the ones in the California are actually better. And this is also where you have the picnic table, so you can open this up, and we'll take a closer look at that in a minute. And it's easy to fit these back in like that, and then close this here. And on this side, you can see that there are more cabinets to store more items. In fact, the cabinet up here also has a place for you to hang your clothes, so you don't have to just rely on folded clothes. If you want to hang some jackets, you can also do that. There's also a shower head down here, which you can connect to this outlet, so you can have a little handheld shower on the outside if you want to wash your feet if they're sandy, or potentially even take a shower if you wanted to. There's also a little place to maybe keep a shower gel, so pretty easy. You also have the blinds to cover the rear window there. Another place where the Marko Polo falls short of the California is the picnic table and chair. First of all, it's disappointing that it takes up so much cargo space, and it's not really worth it because the table is not very sturdy and the chairs are really uncomfortable. They're also very thin and there's barely any back support, as you can see. In the California, I was working 9 to 5 for a whole week, and I couldn't imagine doing that here. I would get back pain. So I don't know, it's best to just take this completely out and just buy your own picnic chair and table, which is more comfortable, and find a different place to store it. Here we have the key fob. Let's take a look at the door closing sound. Pretty solid, pretty heavy. It's also cool because, again, being more van-like, the filler cap is automatically locked away when the door is closed. Now let's talk a little bit about the door. So I do like that this has soft materials all around, whereas the California only had a soft padding for your elbow on the armrest. This is all quite nice. Even here, you have your door lock, unlock, seat heating, window controls, mirror controls, things like that. But very quickly down here, the plastic gets quite hard. This is a smaller shelf and doesn't have any rubber or felt lining, whereas in the California you had a bigger shelf which was rubber lined. And another thing that I'm not too happy about is actually the seat. So everything has to be adjusted manually, like this is for the base to, tilt it. Sure, you do have automatic controls for the lumbar support, but the height, and worst of all, the recline, the wheel is all the way back here. When I'm driving and if I want to adjust this, it's really hard to reach back here. And on long road trips, you're going to probably have multiple drivers. So switching between different seating positions is always going to be a bit of a pain. The driver's seat of the Marko Polo is indeed a fun place to be because I have a really nice overview. Even though the seat is set to the lowest position, I'm actually sitting quite high. I have a great view out forward. And again, the end of the dashboard is just within my reach. In the California, it was really far away. So I feel more connected and I feel like I can see the edges of the van better. I also like that there's soft touch materials here on the top of the dash. And while I'm not a big fan of this fake carbon fiber treatment, you have different options for these inlays. And who could forget Mercedes-Benz interior lighting, the ambient lighting that goes through the inside of those beautiful vents and down here. It creates such a nice ambience. This is also padded material, soft touch, and a damped glove box. Although there's no felt lining here, it's pretty deep. But in general, storage could have been a little bit better. I think the California had more options. You even had a little glove box up here, there. But overall, this gains back a lot more points for the user interface. So let's talk a little bit more about that. One thing I really like about the Marko Polo is the inside rear view mirror, because it doubles as a screen and you can see a live feed of a camera pointing out the back. In fact, this is also positioned inside the rear window, so it doesn't get wet or dirty as easily. And no matter what luggage you've stacked on the back bench, you always have a good view out. I think the biggest benefit of the Marko Polo over the California is its technology. And I mean the entire suite. The sound system is much nicer, the ADAS also is more sophisticated, and of course the MBUX has a lot of control interfaces, which are much better to use when you're driving than just the touchscreen. Let's take a look at the Marko Polo menu, because here on the overview page, you get a nice status update, for example, on the status of your auxiliary battery charge, how much fresh water you have. Again, I have none. I need to fill this up before I hit the road. You can also turn on, for example, the auxiliary heater when you're camping out at night. This continues to have the ambient lighting in the main cabin along with the main reading lamps. So it's really nice. You can set the mood based on the different colors. And some other basic features. But the coolest feature, like I was telling you guys earlier, if you have the air suspension, there is a self-leveling function. So it's really cool if you're wild camping on an uneven surface. You just set this up and then it will use the air suspension to level the van. So when you're sleeping, you're not tilted to one side or the other. Other than that main menu, it's pretty much standard with the rest of the MBUX systems that we're familiar with. However, what the California does have that the Marko Polo doesn't is a second console in the main cabin where you can operate a lot of these functions. This only has it here, or you need to install the app and control that on your phone. Hallelujah. I love these buttons. They have such a nice clicking sound, knurled finish, nice toggle switches for your climate control. These are actually a couple dummy switches, but here is the switch to open the sliding door. And of course down here you have a large touchpad which has a nice little haptic feedback. There's a little vibration that you feel every time you go through the different menus. Shortcuts over here. The dynamic chassis control, now that this has the air suspension, you can change it to sport mode or keep it in comfort. We'll test that out when we're driving. A nice knurled roller for the volume and a lot of other shortcut buttons. So this is a much nicer interface to use rather than the VW's touchscreen only system. The drawback is, as you can see, this juts in quite a bit into the interior. So unlike the California, it's not as easy to step out from the inside, from the driver's seat, to go to the back. It kind of obstructs your knee, so you have to generally get out from the driver's seat and go around from the side door. The steering wheel does have capacitive buttons. I know they're not the best, but at least they're easy to use once you get used to them. There are certain indentations and different contours, so it is easy to feel what you're controlling when you're driving. The right-hand side has, for example, telephone and volume controls, along with the navigation of the main menu on the right side. Here on the left, this is to control the instrument cluster and your assistance systems. And I always love to use the speed limiter. So I think people get confused when I say the speed limiter. I'm not talking about cruise control or travel assist. I'm talking about the speed limiter where I still use the accelerator, because in the city it's much safer to use this and smoother than relying on a cruise control. So it's really easy to use this, and you can set the speed limit with this button here. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when I'm driving. Paddle shifters, although being a van, I'm not so sure how sporty it's going to feel, but you have control if you want them. Gear stalk, wiper, and indicator stalk on the left-hand side. Now the main instrument cluster, again, very familiar. You have different options, different views, so you can see different information or the map. You can also switch between the kind of look. So you have like the understated design, which is very nice and calming, this theme, or the sport theme. You can also just have the map, taking up the entire screen, so you have a very good view of where you're going. So yeah, good useful systems, no head-up display though. Welcome to my campsite here in Jasmine National Park, all the way up north along the Baltic Sea coastline. I've been camping in the Marko Polo for a few nights now, so let me tell you a little bit more about the things I've observed. First of all, the bottom bunk is actually quite comfortable. I was initially worried that because, unlike the California, which has a thicker foam mattress and plates along the bottom of the mattress that you roll out, here in the Marko Polo, these seats just fold flat and you have a soft mattress topper that you roll out. And I was worried that it was going to be lumpy and uncomfortable to sleep on. But actually, it's not too bad. You don't really feel the undulations or the contours of the seat, and it does seem pretty flat. I slept with my head here and my feet on the rear window, and this orientation I think is the most comfortable. The upper bunk I think is more or less the same as the California. In fact, I suspect it's the same supplier as well for the cushions and the box springs. But similar to the California, the same issue persists, which is it's not well insulated. So on a rainy, stormy, windy day like this, it gets loud, it gets cold. The rain is completely kept out, so it's waterproof, but it can be loud and cold. which is part of the camping experience, I suppose. But thankfully, the auxiliary heater is really good. There's a jet of hot air that shoots out from below the driver's seat. It's a little bit loud when it first turns on, but it can quickly warm up the entire cabin, even the top. So that's a really nice thing. Other than that, things I wish they could have done a little bit better. For example, are these window blinds on the side. It's really thin, so it doesn't do a good job of insulating it. And you can see that it's one large continuous piece. And the problem with that is, when I want to open the front doors to access the things that I've stored in the door pockets or just things under the steering wheel or back here, I always need to go from outside and undo the suction cups to then be able to swing the door open. In the California, there were 3 individual pieces, and it was really nice and flush because there were magnets for these blinds and they would just pop into place. And the main windshield also had these poles, so it would go all the way down. Now I have to stick my arms all the way in and use suction cups again, which is just too cumbersome. I think the California does it better. Another thing that I think the Marko Polo could have improved upon is the interior lighting. Mercedes just has a great interior lighting setup and technology, but the nice interior lights with the colors that you see, those ambient lights only turn on when the ignition is also on. When the ignition is off and you're in the camping mode with the camping battery, you have the very traditional interior lights, which I think is a little bit outdated. If they were able to incorporate these colored ambient lights and the animations that they provide to have a nice camping ambiance, that would have been a little bit better. And last but not least, I think the Marko Polo definitely lacks storage solutions, which the California does quite well. For example, the rear window all the way on the back, here in the Marko Polo, doesn't have any storage solutions. In the California, there's a really nice large bag, and especially when we were camping with 4 people, that storage is quite vital. Without it, it's, I think, a big missed opportunity here. Another thing is, of course, the drop-down box or the overhead bin. It's not as large as the Californias, but the worst offender, I think, is the fact that in the actual trunk area, the really bad camping chairs and that basket, which doesn't even pull out, just takes up the entire trunk area. To access it, you always have to remove whatever you have on top and lift the lid to access those chairs and whatever you might have kept in. It doesn't even pull out like a drawer. So at the end of the day, I think that whole rear section is a missed opportunity, and the California does a much better job of packaging that for clever storage solutions. Another interesting feature of the Marko Polo is if you have the airmatic air suspension, that it can level the van when you're camping. So to do that, you need to go to the vehicle menu and start the leveling function. I need to start the engine up, but it starts beeping because of the roof. But I'll explain, it's quite simple. You have to make sure it's in park and then that the parking brake is released and things like that. Then you press and hold one of the buttons and then it will automatically level the van by individually extending or compressing the springs on the 4 wheels to make sure that your pitch and roll is leveled out. And as you can see right now, it's 0 degrees overall. To be honest, since I've been camping at regular campgrounds and camping sites, they also ensure that the camping ground itself is pretty level, because people come with caravans or just their tents. So I really didn't need to use this, but it would be definitely useful if you're wild camping. But the other advantage of the air suspension is that you can raise the ground clearance in general, like I was saying earlier, so that you have a little bit better off-road ability. Let's check what's going on under the hood. Nice to see a gas-charged strut and further insulation. Interestingly, the Marko Polo only comes in a diesel option, so you get a 2-liter Turbo 4 diesel, albeit in 3 states of tune: 163, 190, or 237 horsepower, like the one we have here. It's actually longitudinally mounted, so it's rear-wheel drive, going through a 9G-tronic automatic transmission, although you do get an optional 4MATIC all-wheel drive. The California actually comes with a plug-in hybrid option, so that would be a little bit more future-proof, especially if you plan to have that as your only vehicle and you'll be driving in the city quite often. Let's see how the Marko Polo fares on some winding country roads. So first, I'm going to go into the dynamic selector here and go to sport mode. Now the airmatic suspension also provides a more sporty characteristic, but just a little bit. I cannot feel too much of a difference, but I do feel a little bit more tautness in the suspension. It's not necessarily uncomfortable or bumpy, but it does help reduce the body roll a little bit more. The steering also changes its weight a little bit, and of course the throttle mapping and the 9G-tronic also become a little bit more sporty, so a little bit more quicker and a little bit later in the upshifts. But all that being said, even though this is the AMG line and the 300D, this is not a very fast van. At the end of the day, it's still a camper van, it's a leisure vehicle, and just like the California, it wants to be driven leisurely. But if I were to draw a direct comparison, I don't think this has the outright acceleration. So if I were to come to a, let's say, 20 or 30 kilometers per hour here and put my foot down, yeah, the acceleration is okay, the engine gets really loud, but it's not necessarily very quick. The California, as you might remember, also comes as a plug-in hybrid, so that electric motor, even the electric motor on the rear axle there, does provide a nice push, and that's lacking here. Yeah, and that diesel, while it's smooth and the shifts are smooth, it does sound quite loud and grumbly on the inside. It's also a longitudinal engine, so I feel like it's coming further in through into the cabin, so you can feel that a little bit more. But other than that, the seats are also nice and well contoured. The side bolstering also helps keep me in place. And on these bumpy roads here with the stiffer suspension mode, yeah, it's actually not that uncomfortable. Just because the Marko Polo is a large van, is it any difficult to live with and drive in the city? Well, let's find out. As I was saying, in the city, I really like the speed limiter, so not the cruise control or the travel assist, but just the speed limiter. I'm free to accelerate and decelerate because it's much more smoother. I can react better to pedestrians and cross traffic and cyclists, but I will not go beyond the speed limit. So this is really nice because it notices, like right now we went from a 50 zone to a 30 zone. It'll suggest that, do you want to switch to 30? And with one button, it drops directly to 30. I don't have to click through these haptic buttons. Actually, the steering is also really nice and light, and in the comfort mode of this air suspension, these bumpy city streets are also, the van glides over them. Visibility is also really good because, again, this digital mirror, so to speak, really makes it very easy. But because the B-pillar is behind me, I have a really good view out the side and even here on the left-hand side. And also, because this is a rear-wheel drive platform, the steering of the front axle is a lot more sharper, so the wheels can steer a lot more, and therefore the turning circle is actually quite tight. So I would even say that this is more maneuverable, not just because it's smaller than the California, but like right now, you see here, very easily I can turn. And that diesel engine gives plenty of torque low down, but at lower RPMs you can also hear it. It's not as loud, but you do hear that grumbly tone. So it's not as smooth as the plug-in hybrid, for example, in the California, because there in the city you're driving mostly electric, and especially if you're able to plug it in and charge it, then you're driving, only in electric, and therefore it's really easy. But the big the mirrors on the side, the wing mirrors, also provide good view out the sides and the edges. I have a quick shortcut button to jump straight to the cameras. So yeah, as you can see, it's really easy to maneuver the Marko Polo in the city. On a road trip, you'll find yourself on the highway quite often. So let's see how the Marko Polo fares. The great thing is, of course, the assistance systems work really well. I would say they work a little bit better than the California. There's more details. Like for example, when you come to a traffic light, the camera turns on so you can see that, the light changing from red to green, things like that. And therefore I think the assistance systems here are a little bit more sophisticated. But yeah, it keeps you in the middle of the lane, it steers for you, it maintains a safe distance with the vehicle in front, it's constantly checking the traffic signs to see if there's a change in the speed limit. So it's got you covered there. And this really aids in long distance mile munching because it takes a lot of that fatigue and that stress out of driving, and therefore you can go really far. Another thing similar to the California is that it is a little bit on the louder side inside. And it's not to say that it's uncomfortable, but because this is a very big empty area, there's a lot of air inside. It's becoming, like a resonance chamber. I hear a little bit of those low frequency booming sounds from the road. I don't really hear the vehicles next to me. It's also not really the wind noise. It's just the road tire noise that's kind of creating that low frequency drone on the inside. It's not unbearable. It's not uncomfortable. The roof makes a really good seal. So there's no flex and there is no whistling. So it's not really an issue there either. The air suspension also makes, these undulations on these bridge sections here also much more smooth. It also prevents a lot of that rocking and pitching action. So you have a very sure-footed feeling out on the open road at higher speeds. The seats are also nice and comfortable. This armrest, I can adjust it. And while the California has another armrest directly on the seat, here the door is a little bit closer to you, and the padded armrest on the door itself serves as a good place to rest your elbow. So overall, I think between the two, you wouldn't go wrong. I think long distance cruising ability is a mandatory, fundamental aspect of a camper van, and both of these do phenomenally. I'm at the last stop on my road trip. From tomorrow, I'm just heading all the way back down south. Right now I'm close to Hamburg and I've covered around 1,500 kilometers, and I'm seeing numbers around 8 liters for 100 kilometers, which is not too bad. I was hoping for a little bit better considering that most of these miles have been on the Autobahn. Interesting to note that the plug-in hybrid California I drove also for about 1,500, 1,600 kilometers gave me 8 liters for 100 kilometers as well, and I didn't even charge it. So in the end, I think that is the better powertrain option, especially if you can charge the plug-in battery at home to use in the city, because on the highway it looks like the mileage is actually pretty good and at par with a diesel engine such as this. Now let's talk about price. The entry-level Marko Polo, called the Horizon, which is basically just a 7-seater van, but just a pop-up roof, starts at around 67,000 euros. But the standard camper van with the kitchenette and the cabinet starts at around 79,000 euros. But the AMG line with the air suspension, 4-wheel drive, 300D, all the bells and whistles can easily touch 110,000 euros. That's a lot of money for effectively just a leisure vehicle. That being said, the Marko Polo is around the same price as the California Ocean that I tested, which was 103,000 euros for the plug-in hybrid Ocean trim and the 4Motion. So just goes to show how expensive these vehicles are in general. Now, the big question, which one is better? It's a little bit of a tough question to answer, but I think at the end of the day, the California is just the general better all-round camper van. Yes, the software in the California is really bad. It was glitchy, it was buggy, the roof wouldn't come down. When I reset the infotainment system, it just reset to a factory multivan, and the California control and dashboard just vanished. Compared to that, the MBUX is far superior, more robust, a lot more user-friendly, and of course you have a ton of buttons. But I think the lack of storage solutions and the slightly outdated interior, albeit it does have that nice luxury feel to it, I think is not as practical as the California. Plus, like I said, the powertrain and drivetrain options are also quite limited. This diesel and automatic is good, but you have the traditional drawbacks of that. It's a little bit grumbly, and especially when you're in the city and the automatic downshifts from 3, 2, and 1, it has a little bit of that pulsing engine braking, which causes that deceleration to be a bit jerky. Therefore, my pick of the two would be the California. Let me know what you think, put your comments down below, and of course, make sure you watch my review of the California to see firsthand how my experience with that was. Thanks for watching.